Ready for our third race at the 2023 Silverstone Festival, and this will be the Derek Bell Trophy for the Historic Car Club's Formula Libre. Formula Libre essentially is, has it got four wheels? Is it a single-seater? Bring it along. That's the way this works. And as you heard there from Andy Smith, isn't it funny, everybody tells Ed Foster how easy these cars are to drive. They're all line. The March 782 2-litre Formula 2 car versus the Formula 5000 Chevron. Now, why was it called Formula 5000? Because they had 5000cc Chevrolet V8s. So it is power versus finesse. Again, there are a lot of knives being brought to this gunfight. So who comes out on top? Not always horsepower that triumphs, but the Formula 5000 cars are essentially a Formula 1 or Formula 2 chassis with a honking great V8. So don't expect them to be cumbersome and ungainly. They look and go as well as they sound. So the car's already out there. Towards the tail of the field, you'll see some Formula 3 cars as well, a couple of Rolt RT3s and various other cars with more or less historic backgrounds from the 70s and into the 80s. Martin Haven again with Alistair Douglas alongside me watching the commentary box, and that March 782 should, on paper, probably have the advantage. He was quicker in qualifying, but if he's got to worry about the car, then that might be an issue race on for him.
Yes, we noticed that little haze of blue smoke yesterday, and I suggested that it might have just been slightly overfilled after an early pit stop for a problem which Andy didn't mention in that interview with Ed, but there was a problem early in the session. He came out quite late and set his pole time, but clearly it isn't a problem that was an overfill. He's got a slight oil leak. And another car to mention is right at the back. We saw a shot of it. There it is, the red car, number 11. Now that's Henry Chart. He was out in a different car yesterday, a car that he's only just bought, the Modus Formula 3 car, but that is actually a Trojan T101, which was raced, if you remember, many years ago in racing, a driver called Bob Evans. Well, Bob Evans drove that car. The car hasn't turned a wheel for some years now, but the team who are running Henry were so upset by the failure of Henry's engine, they went back to the workshop, picked up the Trojan, refreshed it, as they said, put a new fire extinguisher in it, and here it is. So a great story for Henry Chart, who is a very young driver who's very quick indeed, so it might come through. But
well, when they say refreshed, what they presumably mean is put some fresh fuel in it, because there's not an awful lot much they could have done in the evening. Fuel, pump the tyres up and just dip the oil. Yeah, so Bob Evans, Formula 5000 champion, the man with the purple helmet, and that Trojan, yeah, that, again, one of the short-lived manufacturers' names, but they burn brightly in Formula 5000, so it's going to be very interesting to see how that goes. Now, most of these cars date from the 70s. The March there on pole with the blue and purple and red BMW Motorsport colours, 1978. But there are, towards the tail of the field, a couple of 1980s Rolt RT3 Formula 3 cars, 2-litre Formula 3 cars. So, going to be interesting to see how a car that's maybe a decade younger than some of these will go as well. So the formation lap completed, and as ever, even though they're pitted in the old pit lane, the start-finish line will be the Formula 1 start-finish line, forming up into our 2x2 formation as we get ready to get underway for the Derek Bell Trophy. Andy Smith leads the Derek Bell historic Formula Libre grid to the line. Alongside him, Neil Glover's Formula 5000 Chevron. And as the lights go off, it is the 2-litre March that is going to be a little bit slower away from the line. But the Chevron of Neil Glover, the pale blue car with a huge airbox, didn't get that power down into the first corner. And immediately our poleman Andy Smith makes a break for the border. The big Chevron of Neil Glover in second place. 5-litre engine capacity against the 2-litre March BMW, but it is going to need to warm up its tyres and its brakes and then really start to use that horsepower down the straight. And Alistair, by the time that the Chevron gets those huge fat slicks up to temperature, the March may be gone.
Yes, Andy, very quick in this car. We saw him here the last couple of years in the same car. He's incredibly quick in it, so really the best chance for Neil Glover was to try and get ahead into the first corner. Didn't manage it, but he's in second place, so Smith leads, Glover second, and the rest of the field streaming through. In third place is Paul Campfield in his chevron. That's a slightly earlier B24 chevron in third place. And then they look rather Team VDS colours, don't they?
Yes.
In fifth place, number 51, which is Christian Pittard in his chevron B28.
Yeah, he's started fifth. He's now up to fourth place. He's got ahead of another chevron, the B29 of Clive Wood. That's car number 20. And already somebody in trouble heading into the pit lane.
Chris Merrick.
So chevrons very much to the fore, but it is the March BMW in the factory BMW M Sport livery of Andy Smith that is running away at the front of the field as he comes down to Stowe towards the end of the lap. He's already got a 3 to 4 second margin over the Formula 5000 cars. Now again, they will warm their tyres, they will start to come through, and there is Henry Chart in the Trojan.
Well,
already?
Amazing.
Does he know a shortcut? Did he use the club circuit or something? That's insane. Henry Chart up to 5th position from 19th on the grid in a car that has not raced since Joe was a boy.
And naturally, you must assume from that Henry has never sat in it before. Amazing.
Well, probably not at speed, but what a fantastic start to the race. That's absolutely sensational. I hope he's got a GoPro on that car, because that opening lap, and he hasn't even completed it yet, that's not Bob Evans, is it, in the purple helmet? That's again, Bob Evans' helmet, the man who drove this in period in Formula 5000, had an all-purple helmet, but plenty of purple on Henry Chart's head. So our leader has long gone, and here is a change for second place, and that is Neil Glover slowing down in the chevron. In the B37, the pale blue car, he's lost 3 places. I sense he's heading for the pit lane. Not sure that we're going to see much of him. And this is not a pit stop race. So up into second place has gone Paul Campfield. He's in the white car, and then the 2 red machines right behind, another pair of chevrons. And here comes Henry Chart. Henry Chart. This is absolutely sensational. Now, our race leader, Andy Smith in the March, setting a 1:57.6 opening lap, and Henry Chart a 2-minute 5.5. However, Henry Chart carving his way through everybody else. He's passed all of these cars on the opening lap on its own, and he's picked up another one. He's now up to 4th place.
That's third.
In fact, that is third place, yes. So there's the second place car, Paul Campfield, yes, because we've still got the Glover car shown on the screen, and he moves up into second place. So it may be a Formula 5000 car that runs down Andy Smith. It's not the one that he even remotely imagined it would be, because there's now Andy Smith with a 5-second lead, and Henry Chart in the STP liveried car, the Trojan, in second place, who is the best of everybody else. That's an astonishing opening pair of laps.
Particularly when Henry's experience in racing, young driver, but his most of his experience in Formula Ford, the 1600cc 4-cylinder engine car. He moved up to the Modus for this year, so he's not done many races, and jumped into this car at the very last minute.
Barely any different from Formula Ford. You know, only another 3400cc, slicks, huge wings, and a chassis that probably doesn't bear much relation in terms of how it flexes to a Formula Ford car. Checks the mirrors. That'll be the last time he needs to do that, unless he actually gets by Andy Smith. So Andy Smith at the beginning of this lap was 10.6 seconds in front, and Smith just set another fastest lap, a 1:55.9 in that BMW engined March 782. So a 1978 Formula 2 car, and this Trojan, an early 70s Formula 5000 car. It's got a massive capacity, if not massive horsepower advantage over the race leader. But Henry Chart's last lap, 1:58.6. Now that involved passing 3 other cars. So you sort of sense maybe that this Trojan, car number 11, has got the potential to match the BMW, the March BMW out front. Now whether he can catch, the gap is coming down. That is a smaller gap than the last time we saw them from Henry starting this last lap. There's the battle for third. Paul Campfield still just ahead of Christian Pittard in the red chevron, and not for much longer. Pittard having a little look on the inside, car number 51. And so coming to Stowe, so good battle, and Campfield ran out very wide there, Alistair. He's really under pressure, isn't he?
He is indeed, yes, coming through the right-hander at Club Corner, and absolute Sector 2 best time for Henry Chart on that lap, and his best Sector 1s and 3s time.
Yep.
So he's getting the pace up, not for the whole lap yet, but he is the fastest car at every speed trap.
And he was only 4 tenths down on Andy Smith in the race-leading March 782, only 4 tenths on that lap, so he has got pace to match it. And don't forget, what are we on now? We're on lap 4, so he's driven this car for 3 laps in his life. And he's now on his 4th lap, so he will be learning exponentially what the car can and cannot. I think he found out on lap 1 that it's slightly different from the car that he practiced, and now it's a very, very different beast indeed. So this battle for 3rd place, Paul Campfield ahead of Christian Pittard, and they're still at it, hammer and tongs, and into the pit lane comes the car that started on the outside of front row. Neil Glover's finally crawled back in. Now that is him making it into the pit lane for the first time, so he's tried to keep the car going for the last 3 laps, and it hasn't happened, but that dropped him, I think it was on lap 1 or beginning of lap 2, out of contention for 2nd place. These guys went by, and then Henry Chart steamed by everybody. Henry Chart may well be writing a new little bit of Silverstone Festival history. A little further back, you can see the bright yellow Strips car. That's Mark Goodyear's car in 16, chasing Ian Rowley. Rowley in the white number 4 chevron. Mark's rather, another 782.
That's actually a variant, a slightly later 1979 car, but done for the 1600cc Formula Atlantic,
right.
Formula 79B as it was called, but yeah, very, very similar in design for Ian Rowley.
Goodyear on the inside, trying to squeeze through his 75 March 75B. So 2 Formula Atlantic cars then, presumably of slightly different vintages. You can see how the 78-79 March is very much lower, flat bodywork and a much narrower cockpit area as well, to reduce that frontal area. Makes it look even more upright than the slightly older car in front, but in fact less so and a little bit aerodynamically more efficient. But Mark Goodyear in the number 5 car moving up into 15th place now and starting to motor away. Meanwhile, let's chart, you see what I did there, the progress of the Trojan. 1:54.1, new fastest race lap for Andrew Smith in the March 782. The Trojan starting to really work its rear tyres in the hands of Henry Chart. 1:55.2 last time round, so the gap is out to 12 seconds. And this is where Andy Smith now has all the time in the in the world to look at his gauges and see what about that oil leak. He has a big mistake in the Beckett's S's. Now, he was looking down as the car locked up. Why was he looking down? And he is going very slowly, and that's not just because he's had a big scare. Henry Chart is about to take the lead of the race from last on the grid, and the March is not progressing at speed. It's picking up a little bit now, but what was a 12-second margin is barely a second now as they get to Stowe. Here comes Henry Chart. Is this going to be last to first in, what, 5 laps? Certainly the March has got a problem, covered in grass at the front after that enormous moment exiting the Beckett's S's. You don't often come out of the Beckett's S's out of control and miss the barriers under the bridge. And through goes Henry Chart. He'll take the lead from Andy Smith. We heard Andy tell Ed Foster before the start of the race they were a little worried about an oil leak that the car had. I wonder if he's going to be in the pits at the end of the lap.
I wonder, Andy just doesn't make mistakes like that in all the years I've been watching him, so I wonder whether a warning light flashed on the dashboard. He did say he would be watching the gauge for the oil pressure, and if a warning light flashed on, he might have wanted to look down at the gauge and just momentarily and missed his braking point for Beckett's.
Yeah, look, he's barely going any quicker than the car in front. Let's take a look again, and as he's coming into the Beckett's S's, look, he suddenly looks down at the left front. Yeah, looking down, and then Now, so he only flat spotted that unladen inside wheel, but he looks accusingly at that corner of the car, and I wonder if that's the moment he applies the brakes where he suddenly feels that something's not right, and something was definitely not right. Luckily, managed to have enough retardation to avoid running into anything substantial. But our new race leader is Henry Chart, and I do think that Andy Smith is seemingly back up to speed again. So he could have come into the pit lane underneath our commentary position at, well, midway through this lap, because it's not the end of the lap, but he is back up to speed or thereabouts. But his last lap, his previous lap was a 1 minute 54.1, his last lap was a 2 minute 6, including a terrifying ride across the grass. Battle for third place still rages on. Paul Campfield ahead of Christian Pittard, the white and red cars. Nose to tail, and again Pittard gets a great exit out of the Beckett Sessions and the Chapel Curve. Here he comes down the hanger straight, looking to go the long way around the outside in this chevron. Paul Campfield relegated to fourth place, and then starting to come back in at the Exeter Stowe. He's alongside into the Vale, doesn't get his nose in front into the slightly milder version of Club Corner we're using here. Makes it a sort of a one long left and then a right-hander rather than a much tighter Formula One start. But again, look at the black marks that Christian Pittard left off the corner there, picking up the throttle before the cars remotely straight onto the start-finish straight. He just left a big black line behind him on the road, but he hangs on to third ahead of Paul Campfield.
Good battle this. It is the other way around from what we saw a few laps ago, but still very close together as Christian Pittard, the man who used to race in Caterhams, if you follow club racing, did a lot of years in Caterhams very successfully, but switched over to historic racing, I think it was last year, and really relishing this, the power of this big 5-litre V8 in the back of his Formula 5000 Chevron.
Probably drives a lot like a Caterham as well. Very sideways and very wayward, and not much in the way of turning grip. A little further back, this is the battle for fifth place now. And Smith in the pit lane, did we say?
Yes, I think he's come in,
okay,
yes.
Andy Smith into the pits. So from second place, our pole man. And that makes this then the battle for second place. Pittard versus Campfield, and behind, you see car number 50. That is Clive Wood, and somebody else going slowly as well with a hand out of the cockpit. Clive Wood just ahead at the moment of Simon Fish, another all chevron battle.
And in fact, Andy Smith did go through, so it did flash up on our screen he was coming into the pits, but he didn't. So good news, Andy Smith is carrying on. And he's now not much slower, is he? 1:55.3,
yeah.
So he's just under a second slower than his best lap, so he's back up to speed again, and as quick as the leader, Henry Chart.
So this all chevron battle for fifth position. Clive Wood ahead of Simon Fish. That's how they started, nose to tail on the grid. Actually, Clive Wood qualified fourth, Simon Fish qualified sixth, and they are battling for fifth. So it's only Henry Chart's meteoric rise from nowhere to somewhere that made the big difference. I'm not sure that Henry Chart was expecting to race at all today, and definitely not to have this sort of race, because when his motors stopped yesterday and he lifted the rear bodywork and saw that basically he put a rod through the block. Right, well, that's my race weekend well and truly over. Definitely has been a very different day to any that he might have expected, and a big spin from Simon Fish trying to go the long way around the outside and then just drilled the throttle in the ex-Derek Daly chevron. And he loses a place as well. So through past him has gone David Tomlin in the Rondell. Now there is a car being pushed up the pit lane.
It's Neil Roddy, number 1.
So that's one of our Rolts, isn't it? One of the... No, it's not. However, here is our lead battle, and there is actually a battle on hand as well now, because Andy Smith is pretty much back up to the pace of the race leader. Last time round, 1:55.36 for Henry Chart, 1:55.32 for Andy Smith. So the March 782 not going as quick as it was, but quicker than it seemed to be after his big lurid moment in the Beckett's S's, and no repeat of that lockup. We haven't seen another big puff of smoke from the front tyres. So it does look, I'm not quite sure what distracted him and whether it was, as you say, maybe just a little worry of something he thought he saw, but he had a big lockup in the final element of the Beckett's S's, and he is just starting to reel in the leader. 4 minutes to go, so it'll be this plus one more that maybe just squeeze this plus two more out, and it will maybe be down to the last few seconds of where they get to the line. Coming up to the battle for 12th place in front of them, 57, the car of Robin Lackford, and he is just ahead of car number 14, Stephen Barlow, who in fact started a row in front of him on the grid. There is Stephen Barlow in his Rolt RT3, one of a couple of early 80s Formula 3 Ron Toranak designs. And that's the difference between an air-restricted 2-litre Formula 3 car and a no quarters asked or given Formula 5000 car. Goes by like the Formula 3 car stuck in second gear, and that looks like there may have been a disagreement there. And the safety car boards have not been swung out, so waved yellows down at Luffield.
That takes away that as an overtaking opportunity, but hopefully they can get that car back going again.
That ain't coming out in a lap, is it? Yeah. I think that's right on the edge. The marshal's going to have to wait there, protected by waved yellows, and walking away from his Schweppes car is Mark Goodyear. So the leader, Andy Smith, with 1.8 seconds in hand. Yeah, so it was a little contretemps.
Ooh, onto the grass and over the curb.
Yeah, the number 6 Lola of Frank Lyons is the red and white car, and yeah, I'm afraid that Mark Goodyear's March is not coming out of the gravel with a push. That's going to need a lift because that left rear corner is completely broken, so it's just sitting on its belly. Meanwhile, race leader has opened up the gap over Andy Smith, so Henry Chart just creeping away now, gap out to 2.6 seconds. It was 1.3, and our camera crews are reporting spots of rain. Now that shouldn't be enough to dissuade these guys from pushing on their hot slick tyres. They should still have, oh no, hang on a minute. Now how heavy is it raining? Red flag. Okay, so the marshals and the clerk of the course obviously decided that car is in far too dangerous a position. I'm not entirely sure I disagree with them there on the exit of Luffield. So the red flags are out. The race is over, and that means that Henry Chart has won in a car he's never driven before, did not practice, that was not at the circuit yesterday, from the back of the grid. Well, I defy you now to have a better story for the rest of the day today.
I must admit, when I took a call last night from our good friend Marcus Pye to tell me that the Hadfields team were bringing that car out for Henry because they were so upset that his own car had broken its engine, I did not believe I would be saying that he'd won the race.
Well, can you challenge Bob Evans, channel Bob Evans rather? I think you obviously can, because Henry Chart has done exactly, whether he even has a clue who Bob Evans even is, I don't know, but that's a remarkable, and again from a car that didn't practice, hasn't had a shakedown, hasn't been run for I mean, even if it's for weeks, it's a big, complex single-seater. That's absolutely remarkable, and actually a great testament to the overall preparation level of the car, that you can drag it out literally from under a dust sheet, put it on the track, and it'll storm past everything in the place. Now, it'll be interesting to catch up with Andy Smith after this and find out exactly what led to that enormous moment in the Beckett's S's, because he was away and clear. It would have been a long chase for Henry Chart to try and run him down. At that stage, he was 12, 13 seconds clear. Well, not everybody quite sure where to go, because our winner and our second place car are coming into the pit lane, but we are going to need them at the podium, which is at the opposite side of the circuit. So that's going to be they're going to have to get waved through by the marshals. Now, under red flag, you should go to the starting grid and then stop and await further instruction. Unfortunately, some of them have headed into the pit lane towards their teams, including the March 782 of Andy Smith, which just comes in underneath us. Did Henry Chart go by? I think he went into the pit as well. So our third placed man, Christian Pittard, there on the right-hand side, and they go behind them, going, come on, guys, come on, we need to go, we need to keep going. Clive Wood understands where they should be going, but I'm afraid the rest of them aren't entirely sure. But the basic rule of thumb in a red flag situation is that you proceed as you would do under a safety car at low speed around to the grid and await further instruction. So you do not race, you do not pass, you do not speed, but you do go to the grid. So coming into the pit lane, I'm afraid our top two have not helped us at one iota. Hopefully the teams will wave them on, although they do seem to be sent into the collecting area. Now obviously there is a podium in the old pit lane, but it's not the one that we've got a camera or a microphone or a presenter at, so we need to get them round and preferably in their cars. Now we are going to have a little bit of a pause before we get our next race out on track, because we're going to need to move Mark Goodyear's car.
They need to be round at the old pits, don't they, where we are, for their podium.
I think the podium's at the new pits, isn't it?
No.
Oh, the podium is at the... Oh, no. Is it?
We're down in the national pits all morning, and then we move to the international facility.
All right, so they are supposed to be coming here. All right, well, so in which case, Chart and Smith are fine, but Pittard is doing what you should do in a red flag, which is go round to the grid. So that's him in the red car there with the blue and white stripes. So Christian Pittard, following the rules for red flags, the overriding rule, presumably in a red flag situation, will be that you respond to the instructions of the marshals, and if they peel you off the track before you get to the grid, then you follow them. But I didn't see marshals waving people into the pit lane. However, they may have been, because we may not have been seeing those pictures. So, however, Christian Pittard now carries on, and this is sort of awkward because the grid they've just driven past. That's where, in theory, you're supposed to go. But, of course, it's not where we need any of them, because we're not using this pit lane this morning. That will be for this afternoon's races. So they now need to carry on all the way back to where they were before, when they weren't sure whether they should have kept going or not, and where our top two have gone. So we will wait for Christian Pittard, as he will be the first onto the podium. And the pit lane is pretty wet outside, isn't it, Alistair?
It is, and I think that's the secondary reason why the clerk of the course decided to put the red flag out. We had a car in a dangerous position, but then we had some rain, and these cars on slick tyres with lots of power, it's not really a very good combination. And
often at Silverstone, the prevailing wind comes across, and the first corner that gets wet is Luffield. So the Luffield Brooklands complex here normally gets the wet. It's coming from behind where the camera is normally towards the BRDC suite, you can see there on the far side of the shot. So very often this is the bit gets wettest first, and where the rain stops and it sort of drifts off. So normally we have a sort of westerly coming in, and that's actually what's happened. You can see from the camera shots it looks pretty dry further round the track. The bits that were wetter this morning, in fact there are some waterproofs going on and some umbrellas up in the grandstand, so it's not heavy rain, but there is a bit of rain. Christian Pittard comes into the pit lane and rumbles underneath us, and following through you can hear the off-cam fluff of the Chevy V8 as he comes underneath us. Mark Goodyear walks back in, and one side of this car is looking pretty good, the other side a little bit less so, unfortunately.
Christian Pittard wasn't stopped for the podium either. He's just driven through the pit lane.
He's going off down to the collecting area. Well, it won't be too far to get him back in. And now Mark Goodyear's put his helmet back on, because it is raining harder. A damp end and a red flag to the Formula Libre race for the Derek Bell Trophy, but Henry Chart, in a car he's never driven before, that did not even practice yesterday, came from last on the grid. Andy Smith had a major moment midway through the race that cost him the lead in the March 782 that started from pole, and after a big battle with Paul Campfield, Christian Pittard finally triumphed into what became third place. Clive and Martin Wood in 5th and 6th ahead of Simon Fish. David Tomlin in Ron Dennis originally prepared Motul M1 in 8th place ahead of Adrian Langridge and Mike Bainbridge. In the more modern Rollt RT3s, Craig Dolby got the better of his car compared to Stephen Barlow, so he is the top Formula 3 car. And a couple of cars failing to complete the distance, including front row starting Chevron B37 Formula 5000 car of Neil Glover. Chris Merrick retiring early on. It was a strong start from the March 782 pole sitter Andy Smith. He feared the power of the pale blue Chevron 5000 car of Neil Glover, but that never transpired. Coming through on the opening lap, from last on the grid to 5th place was Henry Chart in the big red Trojan, and the end of the lead for the March 782 of Andy Smith came midway through with a big moment in the Beckett's S's. He took a while to get back up to speed, by which time Chart had run him down. What was a 16-second lead disappeared. Battles further down the order, not everybody always managing to use the slicks to the optimum effect. And in the end, as a parked car and rain showers approached, the red flags were thrown out. Henry Chart winning from last on the grid in a car that he has never raced. The red flags for Mark Goodyear's car after a contretemps in Luffield. That was stranded right on the edge of the circuit, and the race directors were left with no choice but to red flag it.